Good afternoon, thank you very much. Nice to see everybody. It's nice to be back at an actual event. First of all, I want to congratulate the Chamber for carrying on this really great tradition with Impact Ohio. And Steve was mentioning how this is going to be the first, but apparently a second one will be scheduled on August 4th. So come back and get, no, actually the staff just went crazy out there. There's not going to be a second one after that primary. We're going to have a panel discussion. Let me introduce our panelists. Bob Panucha, Chairman of the Republican Party, Justin Brodsky, Senior Advisor to the Ohio Democratic Party. Welcome, gentlemen. Please keep eating. I guarantee this panel has talked over many chicken dinners. So let me give you a little bit of background on these folks, although you probably know quite a bit about them. So Bob has been chairman of the Ohio Republican Party since February 2021. He's got 3 decades of experience running campaigns in Ohio and across the country. He was involved in running the winning Ohio presidential campaign for President Trump, President Bush in 2004 and 2000. And he played a pivotal role in the Florida recount, as I recall. Bob and a couple of us were down there. And he's been very active in Senator Portman's campaign, running that campaign in 2010. So we're delighted to have Bob joining us today. Justin Brodsky is Senior Advisor to the Ohio Democratic Party. He too has a lot of experience running successful campaigns in the state of Ohio, particularly running Sherrod Brown's very successful 2018 campaign. So thank you, Justin, for being here. Justin's a partner with Left Focus Strategies. So I'm going to ask a couple questions. We'll get the dialogue going, and then we're going to kick it over to you all to ask some questions of our panelists. But let me ask this before I take a seat. Tuesday was historic, and it was kind of unique, to say the least. We had sitting Republican governor challenged. We had a very hotly contested U.S. Senate campaign, obviously. We had a hotly contested, but ultimately not a very close gubernatorial primary on the Democratic side. And then we had a couple of surprising congressional turnouts. So with all that said, give us your kind of 2 or 3 main takeaways. What did we learn on Tuesday? Bob, I'll start with you.
Thanks, Brian, and I'd like to thank Steve Siders and the Chamber for hosting this event and this opportunity to bring us all together. A couple things, I think the most surprising thing to me coming out of the primary election was the disparity between the 2 political parties' participation. Over 1 million people picked up a Republican ballot on Tuesday, and less than half of that picked up a Democratic ballot. And that, I think, is indication of the enthusiasm that we have as a party and where we're going and some of the advantages that we have in the fall. I think another aspect of it is that this is very likely going to be a nationalized election. These midterm cycles can sometimes be about what's happening in the state or what's happening in Washington, D.C., and in this year in particular, I think what is happening in Washington is going to have a huge effect on the elections here in Ohio. And I think it's mainly because of the Biden administration's failure to deal with some key important issues. Democrats control the Congress, although very narrowly. And it's hard not to look at the problems that the country's facing in terms of inflation and other issues and not have that be a drag on Democratic voters here in the Buckeye State. And I think we saw that on Tuesday.
Justin, your takeaways from Tuesday.
Sure. Well, I'd like to echo Bob and say thanks for having me here. Thank you to Steve Siders and everyone for inviting me. It's my first time sitting next to Bob, so I promise there'll be no Josh Mandel.
I showered today, so
look, I think there were 2 things. I think there were 2 things that are important. One is that money doesn't buy everything. In that Senate primary, we saw a lot of Republican candidates pour tens of millions of dollars down the drain, which leads me to my second point, which is that Donald Trump and everything that comes with him still rules the Republican Party in the state. He took a Silicon Valley elitist who had been in 3rd or 4th place with the entire campaign, and got about 1/3 of Republicans in the state to vote for him, which was enough to propel a pretty flawed candidate into the head of the Senate race. And it was that $70 million or so that was spent that I think accounts for the massive Republican turnout that Bob was talking about. You know, there simply wasn't anything near that much spent on the Democratic side because there wasn't any need to spend that much money. So anytime you have that sort of massive spending disparity, you're going to have similar turnout disparity.
Well, let's kind of continue on that enthusiasm, energy kind of topic. So, you know, on the right side, obviously the energy and the enthusiasm is being driven by President Trump, kind of a, you know, pugnacious populism, if you will. On the left side, it seems like the energy generally over the last couple of cycles has been driven by the more progressives, Bernie Sanders, the AOCs. The Trump candidates are winning, but kind of that liberal progressive candidates, whether it's Morgan Harper or it's Nina Turner, are not winning. Why is that, maybe Justin, that the energy from the Democrats is not producing election results in Ohio?
Well, I think I take issue with the fact that that's where the energy lies in the party. If you look at the type of candidates who are winning or who do well in Ohio, it is folks that don't sound as much like that. I mean, Joe Biden is the one who won the Democratic primary in 2020 in Ohio. And even if you look back to 2016, it wasn't Bernie Sanders that won Ohio, it was Hillary Clinton. And Sherrod Brown, while a proud progressive, he wins this state because he's talking about issues that are important to workers, that are important to business. He doesn't sound as similar as some of the folks on the left. But when we talk about voter enthusiasm, and I think that is a really important thing going into this cycle, Republicans have handed Democrats a real reason to come out to the polls, and that is the fact that if the Supreme Court overturns Roe, the Republican legislature and the governor in Ohio is going to make it a crime for a woman to get an abortion and send them to jail and handcuff them. And that is not where a majority of people in Ohio are, even a majority of Republicans. So I think we're going to see any perceived enthusiasm gap obliterated over the coming months.
And Bob, your thoughts in terms of the enthusiasm?
Yeah, I think that, you know, Sherrod Brown is the last Democrat to talk about working family issues, and he's not on the ballot, so I'm going to give him a pass today. But the reason Donald Trump won in 2016 and 2020 with such high margins in the state is because he talked about issues that were important to working class families, to Democrats and to disaffected Democrats and independents that are tired of a Democratic Party that focuses on identity politics and the culture wars, created an opportunity for Republicans to take advantage of. And we took advantage of that with a candidate that put an America First agenda together. They put trade deals up on the screen, put a tough stance on China, less foreign engagement, making our allies pay more for their fair share of our defense posture. And all of that is perfect for Ohio voters. I grew up in Akron, Ohio. I always felt that the Republican Party missed out on an opportunity for working men and women. Donald Trump changed all that. It's one of the reasons we had such great success in 16 and in 18, bucking the trend nationally, where Democrats did much better in that midterm election, and also in 20. And if you have any illusions that I might be wrong about what I'm saying, look at the fact that there are more Mahoning County Republicans on Tuesday than there were Democrats. That's an amazing fact. For a guy whose parents grew up in the Valley and who has campaigned in Ohio politics for 36 years, this state is changing. And it is changing because Democratic Party has abandoned working class voters, and we've taken advantage of it and have been able to reach out to those voters and have them not just vote for Donald Trump, but to vote for Republicans up and down the ticket.
Well, clearly Ohio has become less of a bellwether state in the last several elections than it has been. With the exception of a couple candidates, including your former boss, Senator Brown, Democrats have had a hard time. It was interesting, today's Wall Street Journal, Karl Rove said, Ohio ain't the purple swinging battleground it once was. So Justin, what do the Democrats have to do to get Ohio back into the swinging column?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ohio's more of a swing state than the national narrative would suggest, certainly more than Bob would want us to believe. You know, Sherrod Brown is not a one-time exception here. He's winning repeatedly, and he's doing so because he's actually talking about the things that Bob correctly states people care about here. He's talking about working families, how to bring investment back into the state, how to have more things like Intel come to Ohio, because that's ultimately what will allow people to raise their families here, have their kids stay here, and get folks to move to Ohio from other cities. And that's what our candidates are talking about right now. We have excellent messengers at the top of the ticket. Tim Ryan is certainly no culture warrior, and frankly, I think that when we talk about the Mahoning Valley and the types of things that people there care about, bringing jobs back home, making sure supply chains are here, stopping workers from leaving and going overseas, we're not going to get that from a guy who only recently moved to Ohio a couple of years ago and is more comfortable at a brunch in San Francisco or in his townhouse in Washington, D.C., like J.D. Vance. So I think Ohio Democrats have a good story to tell right now, and they have excellent messengers at the top of the ticket to tell it.
You mind if I
Keep
add on that?
No, you should.
Yeah, I think that, I find that really interesting because Tim Ryan has no chance to get elected. Now, before the press goes and prints that out for me, I'm not saying that, but Democrat campaign committees are saying. The Democrat Majority Fund put $125 million on TV so far, and none of it in Ohio.
That's right.
The DS has put $44 million down, none of it in Ohio. Well, neither of us, maybe my numbers are wrong, but they haven't put any money in Ohio. And we don't know what Tim Ryan will show up to campaign for the United States Senate. Is it the Tim Ryan that got the A rating from the NRA, or the Tim Ryan that has got a 0 score from the NRA? Is it the Tim Ryan that was pro-life, or is it the Tim Ryan that's pro-abortion? Is it the progressive Tim Ryan that ran for president so spectacularly, or is it the sort of conservative America First Tim Ryan that's I see on TV now and then today? I mean, Sherrod Brown can pull that off, but Tim Ryan, he just doesn't have the skill set on it. I mean, sorry, but it's not, he's not a very good candidate. He's got a reputation for not working very hard. And we're going to take advantage of that. And you can say all you want about J.D. Vance, but J.D. Vance gets the America First agenda. He can articulate it. It's a winning agenda here in Ohio. I met with him and his team yesterday. He is going to be Ohio's next United States Senator.
So Justin, you're the Senate guy. Do you agree with Bob on that?
Well, I would point out, that I worked at the DSCC 3 cycles as a communications director, and I was a senior advisor last cycle when we took the Senate back. And the numbers Bob's talking about, the numbers are accurate, but they're reservations. They're not actually money that's been spent yet by either Senate Majority PAC or the DSCC. And party committees on both sides typically lay reservations down in states that they absolutely know they're going to spend, and then they add and subtract throughout the cycle. And I'm fairly confident there will be investment in the Senate race here. And I'd like to address a few things Bob said. For one, in terms of Tim Ryan working hard, he outraised all of the Republican candidates because they didn't raise any money. All they did was open their wallets and put money into the race. Tim Ryan's going to shatter fundraising records in the state, raise more money than any candidate on either side has ever raised in the history of the state for this Senate race. And when we talk about two faces, J.D. Vance literally grew a beard to try to fool people into thinking he was from here. I mean, this guy was nothing like what he looks like for the last 20 years. So I think that Tim is a guy who grew up in Niles, Ohio. He still lives there now. J.D. Vance is more comfortable on the coast. He says so himself. He said that he is, quote, now that feels out of place in Ohio, end quote. And he should, because he doesn't represent the values of the people of this state.
Yeah, a lot of people thought I was from West Virginia until I grew the beard. So it really does. It really says Ohio.
I think he thinks it does. That and the Bengals sweatshirt that he wore for the first time last year.
Bob, let me ask you this. So, J.D. Vance, was a beneficiary, obviously, a very significant endorsement from the President Trump. But despite that, 68% of the Republicans who voted in the primary did not vote for J.D. Vance. So how does Vance kind of consolidate and get enthusiasm to his side to set him up to win like you say he's going to?
Well, I think that's very easy in an environment where you have a Biden-Harris administration that has been a spectacular failure. I think if the world that Justin's talking about was just a quiet little petri dish laboratory, that might be one conversation. But let's look at the reality here. Anybody in this room that voted for Joe Biden because he thought he was going to be a moderate, limiting force to normalize politics in America has to be disappointed. It's been the most radical left-wing agenda of any administration in the history of the Republic. It is an open border strategy that is nothing more than the biggest Democrat voter registration drive in the country. It is policies that have failed upon failed. It is a green energy focus that believes that a pipeline in North America is hurting the environment, but a pipeline from Russia to Europe is not. And if you look at the spectacular failures that we have, the regulatory issues that have burdened this economy, that have created inflationary numbers that take us back to the Jimmy Carter days, which most of you in this room are probably not old enough to remember, but you will experience it soon. Republicans will have a fantastic year. Now, we can all sit up here and make jokes about this candidate and that candidate, but this election is going to be shaped by what Democrats have done in Washington, D.C., and they have demonstrated that they're incapable of leading. And because they're incapable of leading, their party is going to be punished at the polls. It's going to be a great year for us. We're going to pick up a lot of seats we're going to win back the Congress. We're going to win back the United States Senate, and you know there'll be some more opportunities for you next cycle on campaigns and stuff. But make no mistake, man. If you're a Democrat in Ohio, the reason so many stayed home on Tuesday was because they're disgusted with what Joe Biden has done to their party. I mean, the loudest voices in the Democratic Party are the most radical voices. That's why we're winning. I mean, we're winning elections in Lorain County, countywide elections. That isn't because of something we did in a presidential campaign. It isn't because we spent $65 million in the Senate race. It's because people are tired of a Democrat Party that is more focused on Hollywood social issues than they are about jobs, the economy, and what a gallon of gas costs, or what it costs to feed your family in a week. And that might be funny for some folks at the Washington Correspondents' Dinner, but it's not funny to real Ohio working families that are trying to make ends meet.
You know, it's funny that in a question about how J.D. Vance is going to get enthusiasm, you spent about 5 seconds talking about J.D. Vance and the rest talking about National Democrats. The truth is that both of the Republicans at the top of the ticket have a huge enthusiasm problem. Mike DeWine is probably the weakest incumbent governor that the Republicans have ever had. They barely endorsed him as a sitting governor. And I think J.D. Vance is going to have an enthusiasm problem too, because people don't know who he is. 1 minute he's opining about whether Donald Trump is America's Hitler, and 5 seconds later he's talking about how Trump is the greatest president of all time. And that is a credibility issue that he is going to have all throughout the Senate race, because everything J.D. Vance says, it turns out he's completely full of it, whether it's being against H-1B visas and then employing, investing in companies that argued for that exact thing, or waging war against, colleges and universities, but making tens of thousands of dollars from speaking at them. He's going to have a huge problem motivating Republicans. He's not going to get any Democrats. And I think that Bob is right to spend the bulk of his time not touting the candidates that he's running because of how weak they are.
You could go ahead and go down that path, Justin, but that's just not accurate. I mean, you want it to be about something different than the political environment now. You're desperately clinging to that. I mean, the fact of the matter is, I was at the rally in Delaware County where tens of thousands of people people showed up to cheer on J.D. Vance. He's going to have that enthusiasm.
Cheer on J.D. Vance
And, and President Trump. Hey, listen, President Trump won this state by 8.5 points. I know that's a big surprise to you because I don't think your party is focusing on what matters. I mean, we can have a disagreement about what, we can make it all kind of fun and stuff about this and that and whether somebody has a beard, whether somebody doesn't have a beard. But the fact of the matter is, the people that decide elections aren't in this room. Only a small number of people are in this room. What is happening in Ohio? And you guys, you continue to miss the mark on this. And you continue to miss the mark on the issues that matter. And you can say that's not important, but I'm going to tell you, sure as I'm sitting here, J.D. Vance is going to easily win this United States Senate race. He's going to have all the enthusiasm he needs, and he's going to turn out the Trump voters that we need to turn out on Election Day. And that's going to happen whether you believe it or not. It doesn't matter to me because we'll be winning.
I think you're right that there are issues that matter. And I think this campaign will be a discussion of who's fighting for them. So how do you lower gas and grocery prices? How do you bring supply chains back home? How do you stand up to China? It is not by criminalizing abortion. It is not by having a legislature that wants to pass anti-business laws like the Don't Say Gay bill. The legislature in Ohio is so extreme. Every time they open their mouths, businesses all over the country say, oh, I better not come to Ohio, that place is crazy. And the way that you're going to talk about the issues that matter is by listening to Tim Ryan and Dan Whaley. We're talking about middle-class tax cuts, keeping jobs in Ohio, more big announcements like Intel. Not the lunacy of how the election was stolen and how the people who stormed the Capitol on January 6th were heroes and how women should be arrested for having abortions. That is what the candidates at the top of the ticket are talking about. That is what J.D. Vance, who just appeared with Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene, is talking about. That is not a message that voters in Ohio think is going to help them deal with rising costs or struggle to pay for health care or struggle to pay for a good education. You're saying all the right things, Bob. I agree with you, but it's not what your candidates are saying.
Well, listen, Justin, the way you bring down inflation, the way you return Americans back to work, the way you put a shot in the arm of the economy, the way you recreate energy independence in Ohio, so you elect Republicans to Congress. And that'll happen this November.
That's funny because
that is
aren't
your first step.
In Ohio, the Republicans control this state, and it's not happening. They've controlled the state for decades.
You can kind of gaslight people in the room that inflation is an Ohio issue, but it's not impacted by the decisions of Biden.
You would like to gaslight that it's an American issue when it's happening all over the world, so it's the same logic.
So Stivers told me when you asked him to do this is going to be a really tough panel, kind of keep it dialogue. So I got all these notes and stuff, but it's working out okay. Thanks for that easy work here. Hey, let me shift gears because you mentioned Governor DeWine and enthusiasm. And I think most people in this room probably would agree that Governor DeWine has not, exhibited Church-Hellion-like charisma over the course of his career. But I think they also would kind of recognize that he's been pretty damn successful. How do you beat a Governor DeWine with somebody that nobody knows when the guy has been winning elections for 40 years in the state?
He has been very successful, and I think there's one really big reason for that. Look, a lot of Ohio Republicans for years, I said this as a Democrat, haven't necessarily been representing the extreme right wing of their party. That's not who Rob Portman was. It's not who Mike DeWine was. It's not who John Kasich was. It's not who Congressman Stivers was, who looked around Washington, D.C. and was like, God, I got to get out of here. These people are nuts. Mike DeWine, and the reason he's struggling now, and the reason that he had, 40% of the vote or so, 50% of the vote go against him in his own primary, is he has moved away from all the things that have made him so popular and so respected. And honestly, the COVID pandemic was sort of a microcosm for all of his struggles. When that started, his numbers, and I'm sure you saw the same polling I did, his numbers with Democrats were better than they were with Republicans. It was through the roof. He was kind of holding Ohio up as a national model for how a Republican governor could kind of go against what Donald Trump was saying and try to be as safe as possible so we could get, businesses open, schools open, and people to stop getting sick. And then he realized that doing so was going to hurt him in his primary, and he threw all that logic out the window. And that is what DeWine has been doing over and over again since he became governor. He caters to the extreme right wing of the party, which controls the legislature because we have gerrymandered districts, and as a result, finds himself in between a rock and a hard place because Democrats are now mad at him for catering to the extreme right is mad at him for the times he has tried to show reasonable leadership, so he doesn't have a base of support, and that's why he's in trouble. I agree he was tough to beat. He only lost one general election, I believe, ever, and that was to Sherrod Brown in 2006. But it was because Mike DeWine governed from the middle, and now he is forced by his party to govern from the extreme right, and that is going to be a huge problem for him.
So
and these races, yes, Nan has lower name ID than him, certainly. I mean, anyone's going to have lower name ID than someone who's been in elected office for half a century. But these races have so much money in them that each side will have the opportunity to get their message, get their brand out. And I'm not
So, Rob,
worried.
I'll let you respond to that. I mean, what I heard Justin
Yeah.
say is that Mike DeWine just won the Republican primary, and his poll numbers are better among independents because of the way he's governed, and yet Nan Whaley is going to be competitive in November.
Yeah, that's exactly what I.
No. I said at the beginning of the pandemic, his poll numbers were better
Okay.
among Democrats.
Well, Justin, I think you probably agree that Mike DeWine's going to easily win the general election. Whether you want to say that or
I don't
not,
think anything is
is between you. But I think, Nan Whaley, who struggled to raise money in a competitive primary election, is going to struggle to raise money in a general election that no one expects her to win. I mean, we're talking about Rob Birch, Tim Hagen kind of election cycle with her at the top of the ticket. There's nothing very inspiring about her. She's a failed mayor who's trying to go and bring those same policy approaches to the state. So she doesn't have problems with it. But I tell you, Mike DeWine is a very skilled and adept politician. He's won a lot of elections. The 2018 cycle, right there and then, it speaks everything. What your golden boy candidate, Richard Cordray, who led that ticket, lost to him in a cycle where Democrats were winning in every other state in the country but Ohio. And so you can say what you want to say about Mike DeWine. A month from now, nobody's going to care about the Republican primary that took place 2 or 3 days ago, and everybody's going to be looking forward to the election in November. And that's the fact of it. And you know this because you're a hack like I was a hack before I took this job. People are, and you don't have the responsibility to run a party like I do. And the fact of the matter is that when we get to November, everybody's going to be thinking about their bank accounts. They're going to be thinking about what they got to pay for a gallon of gasoline. They got to put what to pay for their groceries. And you've got Mike DeWine there articulating how well he handled the COVID crisis, which I think everybody in Ohio agrees he did a very good job with. You look at Intel and the other job growth that's taken in the state, and he's going to be rewarded for that. And then you look at J.D. Vance, who's a dynamic candidate. He looks good on TV. He comes across well with voters. I've campaigned with the guy. I know he's going to resonate. I know he's going to connect. I might know a thing or two about Ohio politics here. So he's not going to have any problem generating enthusiasm throughout the state of Ohio. So listen, I'd much rather be in my seat right now than in Liz's seat. And we're in a much better situation. All the things are in our favor. That doesn't mean this election's over. But we're going to do everything that we have to do. That's been the highlight of every campaign cycle that I've worked on in this state. And we feel great about it.
And just so nobody takes offense, would all the former hacks or current hacks raise their hand?
I think Jessica agreed it's a badge of honor when you